On April 5th, 1933, the United States government performed a financial maneuver so radical that it would have been unthinkable just weeks prior. With the stroke of a pen, President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, making it a federal crime for American citizens to own gold. Imagine the shock in households across the country. Families who had spent generations accumulating gold coins as the only reliable store of value suddenly had 26 days to surrender their wealth to the Federal Reserve. If you refused, you faced 10 years in federal prison and a fine of $10,000. In today's terms, that fine is equivalent to over $230,000. This was not a tax. It was not a voluntary contribution. It was the largest peacetime wealth confiscation in the history of the nation. Within 10 months, officials had gathered over 300 tons of private gold. Then, they immediately revalued the dollar, effectively stealing 41% of the purchasing power from every citizen who had complied with the law. Now, look at the world around you in 2026. The same institutional machinery that executed the 1933 reset is being rebuilt, but this time, the architecture is digital. While the public is distracted by daily market fluctuations and political theater, the infrastructure for a total monetary transition is being installed in plain sight. As of today, over 100 countries, representing 95% of global gross domestic product, are actively developing central bank digital currencies. This is not about convenience. This is not about faster payments or modernizing banking. This is about the end game. We are approaching a mathematical breaking point where the current global debt, which now exceeds $300 trillion, can no longer be sustained by the existing system. The history of central banking shows us a consistent pattern. When the debt becomes unpayable, the system is reset. Your ancestors in 1933 thought their gold was safe because it had been money for thousands of years. They were wrong. Today, you might think your digital bank balance is secure because you can see it on an app. You are making the same mistake. The technology being tested right now, from FedNow to programmable digital tokens, allows authorities to do something the architects of 1933 could only dream of. They no longer need federal agents to knock on your door to seize your assets. They can restructure your wealth, implement negative interest rates, or lock your spending power with a single update to a central database. In this video, we are going to strip away the complex jargon of the financial elite to show you the exact template of the coming reset. We will analyze the historical precedents, the current technical infrastructure, and the undeniable mathematics of debt that make a 2028 system reset almost inevitable. Understanding this pattern is the only way to ensure that when the system resets, you are not the one left holding the bill for the mistakes of the institutions. To understand where we are going, we must precisely dissect how they did it before. The reset of 1933 was not a chaotic event. It was a surgical operation conducted with cold, mathematical precision. When the Emergency Banking Act passed on March 9, 1933, it took only 8 hours of congressional debate to grant the president near total control over the nation's gold. This was the moment the trap was set. The government did not just want to manage the money. They needed to recapitalize the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, which was suffocating under the requirements of the Gold Standard Act of 1900. Under that law, every paper dollar in circulation required 40% gold backing. The Fed could not print more money to stimulate the economy because they simply did not have enough gold. The solution was as brutal as it was effective. By forcing citizens to sell their gold at the official price of $20.67 per troy ounce, the government concentrated the nation's real wealth into central vaults. Between April and December of 1933, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York alone processed 3,605 tons of gold. That is approximately 116 million troy ounces flowing from the hands of the public into the institutional ledger. But the real heist happened on January 30th, 1934, with the passage of the Gold Reserve Act. Section 12 of this act authorized the president to revalue gold. Overnight, the price was raised from $20.67 to $35 per ounce. Think about the mathematics of that shift. A 69% increase in value declared by decree. If you were a citizen who had surrendered 100 ounces of gold in May, you received $2,067 in paper notes. By February of the following year, that same gold was officially worth $3,500. That difference of $1,433 per 100 ounces did not vanish. It was captured by the Federal Reserve and the United States Treasury. This maneuver created $2.8 billion in new paper value on the Fed's balance sheet without producing a single ounce of new gold or a single unit of economic value. It was a pure accounting transfer of purchasing power. The newly created Exchange Stabilization Fund was seeded with $2 billion of this windfall. This fund, which still operates today under Title 31 of the United States Code, Section 5322, gives the Treasury Secretary permanent authority to intervene in markets without further congressional approval. The lesson of 1934 is clear. In times of systemic crisis, the legal definition of money can be changed overnight to benefit the issuer at the expense of the holder. The wealth of the American middle class was not destroyed. It was reallocated to save a banking system that had overextended itself. As we look toward 2028, we see the same signs of overextension. The only difference is that in 1933, they needed physical gold. Today, they only need your data. History does not move in random directions. In the world of high finance, every major systemic shift follows a consistent 5-step template. Once you recognize these components, you can see the gears of the 2028 reset turning in real time. The first component is the legal foundation. Central banks and governments do not wait for a crisis to write new laws. They use existing statutes that have been sitting in the code books for decades, waiting to be activated. For example, the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, originally designed for wartime, provided the legal authority for the gold confiscation in 1933. Today, similar authorities exist within the Federal Reserve Act and the emergency banking statutes, giving the executive branch the power to freeze accounts or restrict transactions during a national emergency. The second component is asset redenomination. This involves changing the measuring stick of value. In 1934, the government did not change the gold. They changed the number of dollars it took to buy that gold. In a modern context, this could look like a mandatory conversion of your current bank deposits into a new digital currency unit. The third component is unilateral revaluation. This is when the state or the central bank makes a sudden announcement that alters the value of all outstanding debt or savings. We saw this in 1971 when the gold window was closed overnight, and we will likely see it again when the dollar is officially decoupled from its current debt-based structure. The fourth component is coordinated intervention. A reset rarely happens in a vacuum. It requires the world's major central banks, from the European Central Bank to the Bank of Japan, to act in unison to prevent capital from escaping the system. This coordination is handled through the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, which acts as the central bank for central banks. Finally, the fifth component is balance sheet expansion as a policy tool. This is the process of creating massive amounts of new currency to recapitalize failing banks or fund government deficits. Look at the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. In March 2020, it stood at $4,240 billion. By April 2022, it had surged to $8,960 billion. That is an increase of over $4,700 billion in just 25 months. Every time the balance sheet expands, the value of the dollars in your pocket is diluted. This 5-step template is a mathematical machine designed to transfer purchasing power from the people who hold the currency to the institutions that issue it. They use the legal authority you forgot about to change the money you rely on during a crisis you did not see coming. By the time the public realizes the rules have changed, the wealth transfer is already complete. In July 1944, while World War II was still raging, representatives from 44 nations gathered at the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Their goal was to design a new global financial architecture that would prevent another Great Depression. However, the true outcome was the installation of the United States dollar as the undisputed king of the world's economy. At that time, the United States held an overwhelming advantage. We possessed 574 million troy ounces of gold, which was approximately $20 billion at the fixed price of $35 per ounce. According to Federal Reserve data, this represented 59% of all official global gold reserves. The Bretton Woods Agreement created a financial pyramid. At the very top sat gold. Directly below gold was the United States dollar, which was the only currency officially convertible to gold at $35 per ounce. Every other currency, from the British pound to the French franc, was pegged to the dollar. This made the Federal Reserve the de facto central bank of the entire world. If a country wanted to trade internationally, they needed dollars. If they wanted to hold reserves for stability, they held dollars. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were established during this meeting to police this new system and ensure that every nation followed the rules set by Washington and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. For decades, this system allowed the United States to enjoy an exorbitant privilege. We could import real goods and services from other nations simply by printing paper dollars that the rest of the world was forced to accept. But there was a hidden flaw in the mathematics. For the global economy to grow, the supply of dollars had to expand. However, the amount of gold in the vaults at Fort Knox remained relatively static. By the late 1960s, the number of dollars circulating globally far exceeded the gold available to back them. The world began to realize that the king was wearing no clothes. Foreign central banks, led by France, started demanding their gold back in exchange for their paper dollars. This created a massive drain on American reserves. Between 1958 and 1970, the United States gold stock declined from over $20 billion to just $11 billion. The pyramid was beginning to crumble. The Bretton Woods system demonstrated a critical lesson. You cannot maintain a fixed link between a physical asset and an infinitely printable currency forever. As we approach 2028, the world is facing a similar dilemma, but this time, there is no gold backing left to defend, only the fading trust in a debt-based system. August 15th, 1971, remains one of the most consequential dates in financial history. That Sunday evening, President Richard Nixon preempted popular television broadcasts to make a stunning announcement. He declared that the United States would temporarily suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. This was the moment the world's reserve currency officially became a fiat currency, backed by nothing but the full faith and credit of the government. The mathematics forcing this decision were undeniable. By August 1971, foreign central banks held approximately $50 billion in reserves. Under the Bretton Woods rules, those $50 billion represented a claim on 1,430,000,000 ounces of gold. However, the Federal Reserve's actual holdings at Fort Knox had plummeted to just 276 million ounces, worth only $9,700,000,000. The United States had issued $40 billion more than its gold assets could support. The system was effectively bankrupt. Nixon's decision was a unilateral revaluation of the highest order. By closing the gold window, he protected American gold reserves but destroyed the purchasing power of every dollar held by foreign governments and private savers. Within 2 years, the dollar was devalued twice more, and by March 1973, the fixed exchange rate system collapsed entirely. The world entered an era of floating exchange rates, where the value of money was determined by market speculation and central bank manipulation rather than physical reality. Look at what happened to the distribution of wealth. Without the constraint of gold, the Federal Reserve gained the unlimited ability to create currency. Every dollar held in a savings account or a long-term bond began to lose value at an accelerating pace. Between 1970 mote and 1980 mote, the consumer price index in the United States doubled. This was not an accident of history. It was a direct result of the removal of the monetary anchor. The gold window was never reopened. What was described as a temporary measure became a permanent state of affairs. This era allowed for the massive expansion of government debt and the financialization of the global economy. It set the stage for the current crisis, where debt levels have reached such extremes that only another massive structural reset can clear the ledgers. In 1970 mote, they broke the link to the past. In 2028, they are preparing to finalize the control of the future. By the mid-1980s, the global economy faced a new imbalance. The United States dollar had become too strong, making American exports expensive and crushing domestic manufacturing. The solution was not found in the free market, but in a private meeting at the Plaza Hotel in New York City on September 22, 1985. Finance ministers from the Group of Five Nations, including the United States, Japan, West Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, signed an agreement to deliberately depreciate the dollar. This was coordinated central bank intervention on a global scale. Over the next 2 years, the Federal Reserve worked with its international counterparts to flood the market with dollars while buying up Japanese yen and German marks. The results were dramatic and devastating for savers. Between September 1985 and May 1986, the dollar fell 46% against the yen and 35% against the mark. Let us look at who profited and who paid the price. The big winners were United States corporations and the Treasury Department. Because the dollar was worth less, American debt held by foreign nations became 30 to 40% cheaper to pay back in real terms. The losers were the citizens and savers in Japan and Germany, as well as any American holding dollar-denominated assets. The Bank of Japan alone spent $37 billion in this intervention. When the dollar collapsed, the Bank of Japan recorded an unrealized loss of approximately $17 billion on its reserves, according to its own balance sheet data. The Plaza Accord proved that the value of your money is not determined by how hard you work or how much you save. It is determined by the policy objectives of a small group of unelected officials meeting in luxury hotels. They demonstrated that they could redistribute global purchasing power by decree, moving billions of dollars in wealth across borders without a single vote being cast by the public. This coordinated mechanism is a core component of the template. As we approach 2028, the level of coordination between the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and the Bank for International Settlements has reached unprecedented levels. The Plaza Accord was a dress rehearsal for the digital coordination we are seeing today. Back then, they used telephone lines and telex machines to move markets. Today, They use high-speed algorithms and shared digital ledgers. The goal remains the same: to restructure the system so that the institutions survive while the holders of the old currency bear the cost. While most people view the evolution of money as a matter of convenience, the reality is far more clinical. We are witnessing the construction of a digital panopticon, a system where every unit of currency is a data point and every transaction is a permissioned event. As of 2024, the Atlantic Council's tracker showed that 108 countries were already in the advanced stages of central bank digital currency development. This is the infrastructure for the next reset. The technical foundation in the United States began in earnest with Project Hamilton, a collaboration between the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Their research, published in February 2022, demonstrated a system capable of processing 1,700,000 transactions per second. To put that in perspective, the Visa network, which handles the majority of global retail payments, peaks at about 65,000 transactions per second. This is not an incremental upgrade. This is the capacity for total economic absorption. The first major piece of this puzzle went live on July 20th, 2023, with the launch of the FedNow service. It was marketed to the public as a way to send money instantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. By December 2024, over 900 financial institutions had already enrolled. While FedNow is not a CBDC itself, it is the plumbing. It is the high-speed rail system on which the digital dollar will eventually run. It allows the Federal Reserve to bypass the traditional delays of the commercial banking system, creating a direct pipeline between the central bank and the economy. But the most advanced model for this reset is currently operating in China. The digital yuan, or ECNY, has already processed over $249 billion in transactions across 950 million accounts. The People's Bank of China has demonstrated that a digital currency can be integrated with social credit systems and environmental goals. In June 2024, the mBridge platform was launched, connecting the digital currencies of China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates. This system allows for atomic settlement, meaning international trades happen in seconds, completely bypassing the dollar-dominated SWIFT system. What this means for the individual is a total loss of financial opacity. In the 1933 reset, the government had to guess who held the gold. In the 2028 reset, the central bank will have a real-time ledger of every dollar you own, where you spent it, and what you bought. The transition from physical cash to a digital dollar is the final step in removing the citizen's ability to opt out of the system. Once your wealth is entirely digital and held within this central architecture, the gatekeepers no longer need to confiscate your assets physically. They simply need to change the code. The most dangerous aspect of the digital reset is not the technology itself, but a feature called programmability. In every previous monetary reset, once the government issued you a paper dollar, they lost control over how and when you spent it. You could put it under your mattress for 20 years or use it to buy whatever you chose. Programmable money changes this forever. It transforms your wealth from a static asset into a controlled permission. During the pilot programs for the digital yuan in China, the government experimented with money that had an expiration date. If citizens did not spend their stimulus digital yuan by a specific deadline, the balance simply vanished from their digital wallets. Research from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York noted that this feature increased consumer spending by 30 to 40% because people were forced to consume rather than save. This is the ultimate tool for central planners to manipulate the velocity of money. Imagine a world where your digital dollars are programmed with specific restrictions. Perhaps they can only be spent on essential goods, or they cannot be used to purchase items that exceed a certain carbon footprint. This is not science fiction. The infrastructure for these smart contracts is built into the very core of the CBDC protocols being tested today. In a negative interest rate environment, the central bank could program your savings to decrease in value by 0.5% every month. Unlike physical cash, which you can withdraw to avoid such attacks, digital currency is trapped within the system. There is no mattress to hide it under. The Bank for International Settlements has openly discussed the concept of monetary policy transparency, which is a polite term for total surveillance. With programmable money, the Federal Reserve can implement targeted stimulus or targeted restrictions on specific zip codes or even specific individuals in real time. If the economy is overheating, they don't just raise interest rates for everyone, they can simply program a limit on your daily spending. This brings us to the core of the 2028 Endgame. The institutions are not just looking to replace paper with pixels, they are looking to replace the free market with a managed economy. By making money programmable, the central bank gains the ability to recapitalize the entire financial system by directly deducting stability fees from every account simultaneously. It is the 1933 gold confiscation updated for the digital age, executed at the speed of light, and justified as a necessary measure for the greater good of the financial system. While policy and technology provide the means for a reset, it is the cold, hard mathematics of debt that provides the necessity. As of late 2025, the United States federal debt has surged past $36 trillion. To visualize the scale of this problem, we must look at the debt to gross domestic product ratio, which now stands at approximately 124%. This exceeds the levels seen at the end of World War II. But the most alarming number is not the total debt, but the cost to maintain it. In fiscal year 2024, net interest payments on the federal debt reached $892 billion. According to Treasury Department data, this amount now exceeds the entire national defense budget. We are entering a terminal loop where the government must borrow new money just to pay the interest on the old money. This is the definition of a debt trap. The history of sovereign finance teaches us that when debt reaches these levels, there are only three possible outcomes. The first is to grow out of the debt, which is impossible given our current demographic and productivity trends. The second is an outright default, which would destroy the global financial system and end the dollar's status as a reserve currency. The third, and most historically common choice, is a monetary restructuring, a reset. By 2028, the interest on the debt is projected to consume an even larger portion of tax revenue. Central banks will be forced to choose between allowing the government to collapse or devaluing the currency to shrink the real value of that debt. A central bank digital currency provides the perfect mechanism for this soft default. By converting existing debt into a new digital unit through asset redenomination, authorities can effectively wipe clean the balance sheets of the government and the major banks. In 1933, the reset was triggered by a banking crisis. In 1971, it was triggered by a gold run. In 2028, the trigger will likely be the sheer weight of interest payments. The institutions are building the digital system now because they know the current debt-based model is reaching its mathematical limit. They are preparing a new ledger because the old one is full of red ink that can never be repaid in today's dollars. The endgame is not a secret. It is a calculation that has already been made in the halls of the Federal Reserve and the Treasury. History does not repeat, but its mathematical patterns are constant. We have traveled from the locked bank vaults of 1933 to the high-speed digital ledgers of 2028. The mechanism remains identical. Purchasing power flows from the distributed holders of old money to the concentrated controllers of the new system. Your great-grandparents in 1933 thought their wealth was secure because they held physical gold. They were blindsided by an executive order. Today, you may think your wealth is secure because it is reflected in a digital balance. You must realize that the same institutions that restructured the gold standard are the ones building the digital dollar. The coming reset will not be announced with a warning. It will emerge from a crisis just as it did in 1971 and 2020. Whether it is a sovereign debt collapse, a geopolitical shift, or a cyber event, the specific trigger is less important than the response. The response is already written in the code of the Central Bank Digital Currencies and the statutes of federal law. The endgame is a system where the government can recapitalize itself by directly altering the value of the units you hold. So, how do you position yourself for a world of programmable money and mandatory resets? The first step is recognition. You must stop viewing money as a static store of value and start seeing it as a dynamic tool of policy. Diversification is no longer just about stocks and bonds. It is about moving outside the direct reach of the centralized digital ledger. Historically, this has meant holding physical assets, decentralized commodities, and hard assets that do not require an entry in a central bank database to exist. The 2028 reset will be the most efficient wealth transfer in human history because it will happen at the speed of software. But those who understand the template can see the transition coming. Your great-grandparents were forced to trade their gold for paper. You are being nudged to trade your financial privacy for digital convenience. Do not mistake the ease of the new system for its safety. The debt mathematics suggests that a restructuring is inevitable. The technology being installed suggests it will be absolute. By understanding the 5-step template and the history of central bank maneuvers, you are already ahead of 99% of the population. The question is not whether the system will reset, but whether you will be holding the old unit of account or the new store of value when the clock strikes midnight. The architecture for the endgame is complete. The only variable left is your response.